The father had already taken the mother. He came back for the child but found her standing beside the most dangerous man in London. When the girl asked, "Do you know where I can find my mum?" Stefan saw the bruise, saw the fear she refused to show, and decided someone wasn't walking away from that street. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. London's evening rain did not fall so much as descend patient, purposeful, pressing down on the city like a hand that had decided to stay. On the wide stone pavement outside Vantage, warm amber light bled through the restaurant's glass facade and dissolved into the wet dark. The kind of light that promised warmth to people who already had it. The kind of place where men spoke quietly about things that left no paper trail, where the staff learned quickly that some tables were never to be disturbed, and where the owner had not once needed to raise his voice to be understood. Stefan Paul stood at the entrance. Black suit, no tie, a gold watch catching the light at his wrist, the only thing about him that gleamed. The tattoos ran up the side of his neck and across both hands, dark, deliberate ink that did not decorate so much as declare. He was broad-shouldered, clean-jawed, with the kind of stillness that didn't come from calm, but from complete control. His dark hair was swept back. His eyes moved without appearing to move. Men like him never seemed to look at anything directly, and missed nothing. He was not waiting for anything in particular. He was simply standing in the way that powerful men stand, as though the space around them belongs to them too. He was about to go inside when something made him stop. Not a sound, not a movement. Just a shift in the texture of the evening, something that didn't fit. Near the base of the stone column to his left, a few steps from the restaurant door, stood a small girl. She could not have been more than 6. A burgundy dress, thin for the cold, clung to a small frame. Over it, a gray cardigan, the kind a careful mother buttons at the collar before stepping outside. Her sneakers were soaked through, canvas darkened at the toes, the laces limp with rain. Blonde curls, damp and loosely tangled, fell forward across her forehead, and she did not push them back. Her white socks had gone gray at the ankle from the wet pavement. In both arms, pressed against her chest, the way another child might hold a shield, was a stuffed rabbit, worn smooth at the ears, its stitching frayed at the seams, its fur gone thin, at the places touched most, which told you everything about how long she had carried it, and how hard. She was not crying. She was not asking anyone for anything. She was scanning the street, slowly, carefully. Her blue eyes moved from one end of the pavement to the other, tracking each passing figure, assessing and dismissing, not the searching of a child who had wandered, the searching of a child who had been told to stay put and was now trying to hold faith with a promise that was running out of time. Stefan watched her for a moment. Around them, London moved on without interruption. A black cab hissed past on the wet road. 2 men in suits walked by, deep in conversation, neither looking down. A couple hurried under a shared umbrella. Not one person paused. He did not call to her from where he stood. He waited. And then she turned, and she saw him. She looked at him the way children sometimes look at large, unfamiliar dogs, not with fear exactly, but with a careful, considered assessment, deciding. Her eyes moved across his face, down to the tattoos on his hands, back up to his eyes. Whatever she was weighing, she reached her answer. She walked toward him, unhurried. The rabbit held tight. She stopped close enough to speak without raising her voice, tipped her face up, and met his eyes with a directness that belonged to someone much older. "Do you know where I can find my mum?" Not a cry, not a tremor, just a question asked with the composed, terrible patience of a child who had already asked it of the street, of the passing strangers, of the rain itself, and had decided to try once more. Stefan said nothing. Not because the question surprised him, though it did, but because something in it had altered the quality of the silence around them, and he was reading it, the way he read everything. She did not flinch at his silence. She only pulled the rabbit a fraction closer. "She said she'd be right back," Mirabelle continued, her voice even, factual. "She just went to get something. She said it would only take a minute." Stefan crouched down, not slowly, not cautiously, just down, bringing himself level with her, the way you do when the person speaking to you deserves to be met where they are. His forearms rested on his knees. The tattoos across his knuckles caught the amber light from the restaurant window behind him. "How long ago?" he asked. She considered this seriously. "Long," she said. "Longer than a minute." What's your name? Mirabel. Mirabel, he said at once, to fix it. And your mum? What does she look like? Brown hair. She has a blue bag. She always holds my hand when we walk. A small pause. She doesn't let go. He looked at the street. Both directions. The rain continued without opinion. No woman with a blue bag. No figure hurrying back with an apology forming on her lips. No taxi pulling up. Only the wet stone, and the indifferent city, and this child standing in it. Only beginning to understand that something was wrong. He looked back at Mirabel. She was still watching him. Still composed. But her grip on the rabbit had tightened, the small knuckles pale, and her eyes had taken on a quality he recognized, not panic, but the very edge of it, held back by the last of a child's hope that an adult would have an answer. He did not offer her false comfort. He did not tell her everything was fine. He simply said, "Stay with me." And something in those 3 words, the flatness of them, the certainty seemed to reach her in a way that a softer reassurance would not have. She gave a single, small nod, shifted the rabbit in her arms, and stood beside him. Stefan straightened, reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone. He was already scanning the pavement, already calculating, already beginning the quiet machinery of a man who solved problems when the sound reached them. Heavy footsteps on wet stone. Fast, purposeful. Coming from the side street to the left, Mirabel heard them too. He felt it before he saw it, the way she went still. Not the stillness of curiosity, the stillness of recognition. The kind a child develops when a particular set of footsteps has meant something bad for long enough that the body learns to brace before the mind catches up. Stefan turned. A man was approaching from the alley mouth, breathing hard, eyes sharp and scanning until they landed on Mirabel, and stopped. "There you are," the man said. Mirabel did not move toward him. She did not speak. She only pressed, almost imperceptibly, one small step closer to Stefan's side. The man who walked out of that alley did not look like a father coming to collect his child. He looked like a man collecting something he had misplaced and was irritated to have had to search for. He was broad, heavy-set, dressed in a dark jacket over a gray shirt, the collar open. His hair was cut close at the sides, longer on top, and the rain had flattened it against his forehead. He was not old, perhaps mid-30s, but something in the way he carried himself added years. A hardness around the jaw. Eyes that moved fast and settled slow. The kind of face that had decided a long time ago that the world owed it something and had been collecting interest ever since. He stopped a few feet away. His eyes went to Mirabel first, then to Stefan, then back to Mirabel, with the particular look of a man recalibrating, not because he was uncertain, but because the scene was not arranged the way he had expected it to be. "That's my daughter," he said. Not to Mirabel, to Stefan, as if Mirabel were a fact to be confirmed rather than a person to be addressed. Stefan did not respond immediately. He did what he always did when a man revealed himself in the first sentence he spoke. He listened to what was underneath it. The tone, the framing. "That's my daughter. Not there she is. Not thank God. Not even her name." Ownership stated as argument. As though the word mine was a credential that settled everything. He looked at Mirabel. She had not moved toward her father. She had not smiled. Had not reached for him. Had not done any of the instinctive things a child does when a safe person arrives. She stood exactly where she had been standing, one step to Stefan's left, and her eyes were fixed on a point somewhere near the wet pavement between them. The rabbit held flat against her chest like she was trying to make herself smaller. That told him everything. She was alone, Stefan said. His voice was level, offering information, not accusation. Watching. She was waiting, the man said, clipping the words. "I was close. Come on." He said this last part at Mirabel, stepping forward, extending his hand, not open, not inviting. Extended the way you extend a hand towards something that belongs to you. Mirabel did not take it. She looked up at Stefan instead. Just for a moment. Just a flicker. But it was enough, the way a child looks at the one adult in a room they have decided is safe, before they have to face the one they are afraid of. The father's jaw tightened. He stepped forward and closed his hand around her upper arm. "Let's go," he said, quieter now, which was somehow worse. The lowering of a voice in public, when what it wants to do is shout. Mirabel's feet dragged. Not dramatically, not a tantrum, not a performance, just the quiet physical resistance of a small body that did not want to go where it was being pulled. "You're hurting me," she said. 3 words, stated plainly, as if she had said them before, and knew that saying them did not always help, but said them anyway. The father did not loosen his grip. What happened next was fast. He pulled her forward. She stumbled slightly on the wet stone. He reached down with his free hand and struck her across the cheek. Not hard enough to knock her down, controlled enough to be called discipline by anyone who wanted to call it that, but hard enough that the sound of it cut through the ambient noise of the street, sharp and flat, like something snapping. Mirabel did not cry out. She pressed her lips together and clutched the rabbit. That silence was worse than any cry would have been. Stefan stood up. He had been crouching. Now he stood fully, unhurriedly, and when he reached his full height, the geometry of the pavement changed. He was not a small man. He did not need to raise his voice, or shift his expression, or make any signal of threat at all. He simply stood, and the weight of what he was filled, the space between them. "Let go of her," he said. Low, final, the kind of voice that has never needed to repeat itself. The father released Mirabel's arm. Not from compliance, from instinct. The same instinct that makes a man step back from the edge of something before his mind has finished deciding whether to. He recovered quickly. Straightened. Let contempt replace the flash of uncertainty. "This is a family matter," he said. "You have no business here." "She's a child who was left alone in the rain," Stefan said. "And you just hit her on a public street. That makes it my business. She's mine. She's not property." The words landed without heat. That was what made them land. Around them, the street had slowed. A woman near the restaurant entrance had stopped walking. 2 men outside the bar opposite were watching. The small, inevitable audience of a city that pretends not to notice and always does. The father felt it. His eyes moved across the gathering faces, calculating, reassessing. His hands flexed at his sides. "You'll regret this," he said to Stefan, quietly. The way men say things they mean. Then he looked at Mirabel, one long look, something in it that was not love but wanted to pass for it, and turned and walked back toward the alley. Not running, walking, controlled enough to seem like a choice. Stefan watched until he was gone. Then he crouched back down. Mirabel was looking at the pavement. Her cheek had reddened where the hand had met it. She had not cried. She was not going to cry. That, too, told him something about how long she had been learning not to. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. A small, practiced shake. Then she looked up at him and asked, for the second time, in the same composed and heartbreaking voice, "Why hasn't Mum come back?" Stefan looked at the alley mouth where the man had disappeared. The street was empty now. Quiet, rain falling on stone. And for the first time since she had asked him her question in the rain, something cold moved through him that had nothing to do with the weather. Ruth Wilson had not wandered off. She had not been delayed. Something had happened to her, and the man who had just walked away knew exactly what it was. Stefan did not take Mirabel inside immediately. He stood for a moment on the wet pavement, eyes on the alley mouth, running the calculation that men in his position ran automatically: threat level, variables, what the next 60 seconds required. The father had retreated. The street had returned to its indifferent rhythm. Rain fell without pause. He looked down at Mirabel. She was still watching the spot where her father had disappeared, her expression unreadable, in the way children's expressions become unreadable when they have learned that showing too much costs something. The redness on her cheek had deepened slightly. She had not raised her hand to touch it. "Come inside," Stefan said. Not a question, not a request dressed up as one. Just a direction, stated plainly, in the same voice he used for everything, and somehow that plainness was what made her nod and follow. Vantage was warm in the way only places with real money behind them are warm, not just heated, but insulated from the world. Dark wood paneling, low lighting, tables set with white linen and candles that had been burning long enough to know their purpose. The dinner service was underway, and the room carried the low, careful murmur of people eating well. Every head turned slightly when Stefan walked in, not obviously, not rudely, but turned. He did not acknowledge it. He guided Mirabel to a small booth near the window glass on one side, wall on the other, a clear view of the street, and gestured for her to sit. She climbed up onto the seat and set the rabbit on the table in front of her, straightening its ears with both hands, a small, precise act of order in an evening that had none. A member of staff appeared without being called. "Water," Stefan said, "and something warm, whatever you have." He sat across from her. For a moment neither of them spoke. Mirabel looked out at the street through the rain-blurred glass, still searching, still running that slow, patient scan across every figure that passed. He watched her do it. watched the hope compress a little further each time a figure passed that was not her mother. "What time did she leave you?" he asked. Mirabel thought about it carefully. "Before it got dark. She said the taxi was coming, and she needed to get something from the shop. Just one thing." "Which shop?" "I don't know. She said stay near the door. She said she'd see me from the street." "What door?" She pointed. "Through the glass, down the pavement, perhaps 40 meters, the recessed entrance of a small newsagent, its light still on, its doorway just deep enough to shelter a child from the rain." Stefan looked at it. Then at the alley beside it. Something settled in him that was not quite certainty, but was close enough to act on. He pulled out his phone and made a call. One word when it connected a name, and then, "Pull the street footage. 40 meters south of Vantage. From 30 minutes ago. Now." He set the phone face down on the table. Mirabel was watching him. "Are you going to find her?" she asked. "I'm going to look," he said. She seemed to weigh the honesty of that against the comfort of a promise, and decide perhaps because she had been given promises before that didn't hold that honesty was better. She nodded. The warm drink arrived. Hot chocolate. As it turned out, the staff had made a quiet, correct decision. Mirabel wrapped both hands around the cup. The rabbit sat propped against the wall beside her, its worn face level with the table, present and accounted for. "His name is Rabbit," she said, following Stefan's glance. "Good name," he said. She almost smiled. Almost. "Mum gave him to me when I was 2. She said I named him myself." A pause. "She says I was very serious about it." "Sounds right," Stefan said. This time the almost smile made it a fraction further. Then it faded. "He was waiting for us," she said quietly. Stefan went still. "Who was?" "My dad." She said the word with a particular flatness. Not hatred, not grief, just a word that had lost the warmth it was supposed to carry. "He wasn't supposed to come near us," the court said. She looked at her hot chocolate. "But he came near us anyway. He stood outside my school. He sat in his car on our street. Mum would see him and hold my hand tighter." "Did he say anything to you?" "At school?" He waved. She said it as though the wave had been the most frightening part. Like it was normal. Stefan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. A message from his head of security. 4 words and an attachment. "You need to see this." He opened the footage. The angle was from a camera mounted above the newsagent entrance timestamp, showing 37 minutes ago. The quality was good enough. It showed Ruth Wilson, brown hair, blue bag, moving quickly toward the shop, then pausing at the alley entrance as a figure stepped out. The father. He had not been following them from behind. He had been waiting ahead. He had known their route. On the screen, soundless and gray, the footage showed a brief exchange. Ruth backing up, the father advancing, a second figure appearing from deeper in the alley, Ruth turning, the father's hand closing on her arm, both figures pulling her backward into the dark. 37 seconds from first contact to disappearance. Then the alley was empty. Mirabel was talking again, something about their apartment, about how her mother had packed their bags that morning, about how it had felt like an adventure until it didn't. Stefan listened without appearing to have stopped watching her, even as his mind had already moved 3 steps forward. This was not a domestic incident. This was not a man acting on impulse. This was planned, coordinated, executed with the kind of timing that required either surveillance or inside information. Ruth Wilson had been taken, and her daughter was sitting across from him drinking hot chocolate, still believing her mother had gone to get one thing and would be right back. He looked up from his phone. Mirabel had gone quiet. She was watching him again, those old, careful eyes reading his face the way children read faces when adults are the only book they have. "She's not coming back by herself, is she?" she said. Not a question that wanted false comfort. A question that already knew. Stefan held her gaze. "No," he said, "but I'm going to bring her back." Mirabel looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up Rabbit, settled him in her lap, and said, "You should probably hurry." The booth had become its own small world. Outside, London moved through its evening, without knowing or caring what was unfolding inside a warm restaurant on a rain-wet street. Inside, Mirabel sat with Rabbit in her lap, and her hot chocolate half finished, watching Stefan the way she had been watching the street earlier, patient, steady, alert to any change in what she was reading. He had made 2 more calls since she'd told him to hurry. Both brief, both quiet enough that she couldn't have made out the words, though she watched his face the entire time, translating expression instead of language. He had the kind of face that gave very little away, but she was Stefan was beginning to understand. Very good at reading very little. His security chief, Doru, arrived within 10 minutes. He was a compact man, economical in everything: movement, speech, expression. He set a tablet on the table without preamble, angled so Stefan could see it, and stood at the edge of the booth with his hands clasped in front of him. He glanced once at Mirabel. She looked back at him without blinking. He looked back at Stefan. 6 police reports in 14 months, Doru said, low. Filed by Ruth Wilson, against the same man. 3 for harassment, 2 for physical assault, 1 for criminal threats. Charges? First 2 dropped, she withdrew. 3rd conviction for common assault, suspended sentence. The threats charge is still pending. Stefan looked at the tablet. A photograph on the file, the father. Same jaw, same eyes that moved fast and settled slow. His name was recorded on the police documents, but Stefan did not say it aloud. Names, in his experience, made things personal before they needed to be. Right now, this man was still a problem to be understood, before he was a problem to be solved. Restraining order? Granted 4 months ago. 200-meter exclusion from Ruth Wilson and the child. Violation reported twice. Both times he claimed proximity was coincidental. Doru's tone remained flat. Police logged it. No further action. Mirabel had been listening. Stefan had not tried to stop her. He had a philosophy about children and information that they almost always already knew more than adults assumed, and that pretending otherwise only taught them that the truth was something they had to find alone. The paper didn't stop him, she said. Both men looked at her. He told Mum that, she continued, matter-of-factly, smoothing Rabbit's ear with her thumb. He said, she paused, retrieving the exact words with the precision of a child who has stored things carefully because she understood, instinctively, that they mattered. No paper can stop me. I will take what is mine. The booth was quiet for a moment. She told you he said that? Stefan asked. I heard it, Mirabel said. He rang her. She didn't know I was in the hallway. A pause. I didn't tell her I heard. She looked scared enough already. Stefan looked at her for a long moment. A 6-year-old who had been quietly carrying the weight of that, alone, choosing to protect her mother from the knowledge of having been overheard. Storing it, surviving on it. He looked back at Doru. Financial? Doru scrolled the tablet. Sold his flat 6 weeks ago. Cash transaction. Closed 2 of 3 bank accounts. The 3rd reduced to a minimal balance. He paused. Passport application processed 8 weeks ago. New document, despite a valid existing one. Flight searches? His browser history was obtained through, Doru chose his next words with professional care, unofficial channels, multiple searches, Eastern European destinations, then broader, non-extradition territory. How recent? Most recent search yesterday morning. Yesterday morning. Stefan absorbed that. The man had been searching for exit routes the morning before he stationed himself in an alley to intercept a woman and her daughter who were leaving for an airport that night. The sequence was not coincidence, arranged to look like planning. It was planning that had always intended to look like it could never be stopped. He knew they were leaving tonight, Stefan said. Yes, which means he had access to information about their movements. Either surveillance or a source. Doru's expression remained neutral. Probably both. Mirabel had gone quiet. Stefan looked across at her. She was not looking at the tablet. She was looking at the table surface, her hands wrapped around Rabbit, and her face had changed, not collapsed, not crumpled, but settled into something older than it should have been. The expression of someone assembling pieces they had hoped would not fit together, and finding that they did. He was watching us for a long time, she said. Not a question. Yes, Stefan said. And Mum knew. Your mum was trying to protect you. I know. She looked up. That's why she packed everything. She told me we were going somewhere new. She made it sound exciting. Her voice remained steady, but her grip on Rabbit had tightened again, that small tell she couldn't fully control. She was scared, wasn't she? The whole time. She was brave, Stefan said. The whole time. Mirabel looked at him, assessing that, checking it for truth the way she checked everything. Then she nodded, slowly, accepting it into whatever framework she was building to make sense of the evening. Doru leaned slightly forward. Vehicle's been traced to a registered address, industrial area, east. Dock, warehouse district. We're running additional checks on associated properties. Stefan nodded once. How long? 20 minutes, maybe less. Stefan looked at Mirabel. She was watching him again with those careful, ancient eyes. He had been in rooms with dangerous men and felt less observed. "Are you going to go and look for her?" she asked. "Soon," he said. "Can I come?" "No." She held his gaze for a moment, not arguing, not pouting, just looking, and then accepted this, with the same quiet pragmatism she seemed to apply to everything. "Will you tell me the truth?" she said. "When you find out something, will you tell me actual truth? Not just the nice version?" Stefan considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Yes," he said. She seemed to sit slightly straighter. "Okay," she said. "Then I'll wait." She picked up her hot chocolate. It had gone cold. She drank it anyway, both hands around the cup. Rabbit propped against her side, rain tracing lines down the window beside her. Doru's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Looked at Stefan. "We have a location." The docks at night had a particular quality of silence. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of things that did not want to be heard. Warehouses standing dark against a sky the color of bruised iron. The Thames, somewhere beyond, invisible but present, its smell carried on the cold air. Cranes motionless overhead like enormous punctuation marks at the end of sentences no one had finished. Stefan's car moved without headlights for the final 200 meters. There were 3 vehicles in total, his and 2 others carrying men who understood that tonight required stillness over speed, patience over force. Men he had chosen for precisely this kind of situation, not the loudest in the room, but the ones who knew how to read a room before entering it. Doru sat in the passenger seat, tablet open, the blue light of it kept low. "Warehouse 7, he said quietly. "The registered address is a shell company dissolved 14 months ago, but the electricity account was reactivated 3 weeks back." 3 weeks, Stefan said. He was preparing this location before he made his move. Stefan said nothing. He was looking at the building through the rain-specked windscreen. A long, low structure. Corrugated walls, dark windows, a single light visible through a gap in the roofline. Warm and yellow and wrong for an abandoned building at this hour. Someone was inside. He thought of Mirabelle, sitting in the booth at Vantage with a cold cup of hot chocolate and a stuffed rabbit, waiting for actual truth and not the nice version. He got out of the car. They moved on foot from 50 meters out. 4 of them. Single file, close to the wall of the adjacent building, footsteps absorbed by the rain that was still falling, steady and useful. Stefan led. He did not carry a weapon visibly, he rarely did. He had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous thing a man could project in a tense situation was absolute certainty, and that certainty required no props. At the corner of Warehouse 7, they stopped. Doru crouched beside a small window set low in the wall. Old glass, wire-reinforced, filmed with grime. He wiped a patch clear with the heel of his hand and looked through. He held up 2 fingers, 2 people inside, then 1 finger, held low, then raised, meaning 1 standing, 1 not. Stefan looked. Through the smeared glass, in the yellow light of a single work lamp hung from a ceiling hook, he could see the layout. The warehouse floor was concrete, largely empty, stacked wooden pallets against the far wall, a rusted shelving unit, a folding table near the center. Beside the table, on a chair, with her hands bound behind her, and a gag that had been tied rather than taped, was Ruth Wilson. Brown hair, blue bag on the floor beside her, 1 strap torn. Her head was up, not down. She was awake, alert, her eyes moving across the space with a controlled fear that looked, to Stefan, like a woman who was frightened, but had not stopped thinking. Good. The father stood with his back to the window, phone to his ear. He was pacing short, tight circuits, 3 steps one way, 3 steps back, agitated, the kind of movement that came from a plan beginning to fray at the edges. Stefan listened through the glass. Fragments only the rain and the distance stripped most of it, but enough. She's not there anymore. Someone has her. A pause. I don't know who. I'll handle it. Another pause. Longer. And the response from whoever was on the other end was clearly not what he wanted to hear, because his pacing stopped and his free hand pressed flat against the wall. I said I'll handle it. He ended the call. He stood still for a moment with his forehead almost touching the wall. Then he turned and looked at Ruth. Stefan could not hear what he said, but he could read the posture, the slow walk toward her, the way he crouched to her level with a familiarity that was its own kind of violence, the closeness of someone who had learned that proximity itself was a weapon. Ruth did not look away from him. That steadiness, Stefan noted, was where Mirabelle had learned hers. He straightened up from the window. His plan had been entry, control, recovery. Clean and quiet, Police called after with evidence packaged. He had done this kind of thing before, in contexts considerably more complicated. The variables here were manageable: 2 people, 1 location, 1 man who was dangerous in the way of a cornered animal, but not trained, not professional. Then Doru touched his arm. He pointed at his phone. A message from the second vehicle, positioned at the rear of the building. Movement at back exit. Looks like prep for vehicle loading. He's moving her. Stefan looked back through the glass. The father had Ruth on her feet now, her hands still bound. He had her by the arm, the same grip, Stefan noted, the same grip he had used on Mirabelle on the pavement, and he was steering her toward the rear of the warehouse, toward a door that led, according to the footage Doru had pulled, to a loading bay where a second vehicle was parked. The calculation changed. Once she was in that vehicle, the location variable collapsed, a moving target in an unknown direction that was a different problem, a worse one. Stefan made a decision. He stood, moved to the warehouse's side door padlocked, but the lock was old, and Doru had already produced what was needed and waited the 3 seconds it took to open. He pushed through. The father heard it. He turned, and for one suspended moment, the 3 of them existed in the same space: the man, the woman he had taken, and the man who had come to bring her back. The work lamp threw long shadows. Rain hammered the roof. Ruth's eyes found Stefan, and something in them shifted, not relief, not yet, but recognition. Someone came. The father let go of Ruth's arm. Not from surrender, from calculation, the same recalibration Stefan had watched him perform on the pavement, buying seconds while he decided what to do with them. "You have no idea," the father said slowly, "what you've walked into." Stefan looked at Ruth. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, eyes steady. He looked back at the father. "I know exactly what I've walked into," he said. "The question is whether you understand what you've walked into." The father's eyes moved to the door behind Stefan. Doru filled it, then the window to the left. Another figure. The father's breathing changed the first real signal. Beneath all the performance of authority, that something animal in him had registered the truth of the situation. Then his phone rang. He glanced at it, and in the half-second his eyes dropped. He made his decision. He ran not for the door, not for Ruth, but for a gap in the shelving at the back wall. A secondary exit Stefan's men had not fully covered. He was through it before anyone reached him. Gone into the dark and the rain and the spaces between warehouses that a man who had been planning this for weeks would have already mapped. Stefan stood at the gap, listened. Footsteps, then a vehicle distant, accelerating, swallowed by the city. He turned back. Ruth was standing exactly where she'd been left, her hands still bound, watching him with an expression that held gratitude and terror in equal measure. "My daughter," she said. The first words. "Where is she?" "She's safe," Stefan said. "She's waiting for you." Ruth closed her eyes. One breath. Just one, the compressed exhale of a woman releasing something she had been holding since an alley and a pair of hands and a car door closing. Then she opened them. "He'll come back," she said. Not a fear, a fact. Stefan crouched and worked the binding at her wrists. "I know," he said. "Let him." They drove back through the city in silence. Ruth sat in the rear seat, her torn bag in her lap, her hands wrapped around each other the way they had been wrapped when bound, as though the body remembered the constraint, even after it was gone. Doru had found a blanket in the boot and placed it around her shoulders without comment. She had pulled it tight without comment either. Stefan sat beside her. He did not push for conversation. He had learned that people who had just come through something needed a moment to locate themselves in the world before they could speak usefully about it. He watched the city move past the windows, the rain still falling, the streets still indifferent, and he waited. It was Ruth who broke the silence. How long was she alone? "Long enough to find me," Stefan said. Ruth turned to look at him. He could see her assembling what that meant, the gap between "I'll be right back" and "long enough to find a stranger," and the way it landed on her face was not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it. The particular pain of a mother measuring the distance between what she had promised and what had actually happened. Was she frightened? Stefan considered the honest answer. "She was searching," he said. "There's a difference." Ruth absorbed that, turned back to the window. "She doesn't frighten easily," she said quietly. "I used to think that was strength. Now I think it's because she's had too much practice." Back at Vantage, Doru took Ruth to a private room on the first floor, somewhere warm, somewhere with a door that locked from the inside. Somewhere a doctor Stefan trusted could assess her without the involvement of anyone who might generate a record before Stefan was ready for one. Stefan went back to the booth. Mirabel was exactly where he had left her. Rabbit on the table, cold cup beside him. She was drawing on the back of a paper menu with a pen she had apparently acquired from a member of staff. Small, focused strokes, the kind of concentrated industry children produce when they are managing something difficult with their hands, so their mind can manage something else. She looked up when he sat down. Read his face. "She's here," she said. Not a question. "She's upstairs," Stefan said. "She's not hurt. She's asking for you." Mirabel set the pen down. She picked up Rabbit. Then she looked at Stefan for one more moment, checking, with those careful eyes, that this was actual truth and not the nice version. And whatever she found in his face satisfied her, because she stood up and said simply, "Take me to her." He did. He left them together. He stood outside the closed door for 3 seconds, long enough to hear through the wood, faint and absolute, the sound of Mirabel's composure finally breaking. Not a cry. Something quieter. The specific sound of a child who has been holding something enormous, pressing her face against the one person she had been holding it for. He walked back downstairs. Doru was waiting in the corridor with the tablet. "He's moving," Doru said. "Where?" "Not far. Phone signal puts him in the Bermondsey area. He's not fleeing yet, he's thinking. He'll regroup," Stefan said. "He had a plan and it fractured. Men like him don't abandon plans. They revise them." Doru set the tablet on the corridor table. "There's more. Since you left, we went deeper." Stefan looked at the screen. What Doru had assembled in the past hour was the architecture of an obsession. Not the surface facts of police reports and court orders, those were the visible structure. Beneath them was something more revealing. The internal logic of a man who had spent 14 months constructing a version of reality in which he was the wronged party, and everyone who stood between him and what he wanted was an obstacle to be removed. The police complaints filed against him, 6 of them he had counterfiled on every single one. The restraining order he had publicly characterized, in documented communications to mutual acquaintances, as fabricated, a weaponized legal instrument, evidence of a conspiracy against him. He had told people Ruth had stolen his daughter. He had told people the court had been manipulated. He had, and this was the detail that told Stefan the most, begun reaching out, 8 weeks ago, to men on the periphery of networks Stefan knew. Not directly, through intermediaries, looking for assistance of the kind that didn't appear in any filing. He was trying to hire help, Stefan said. "Trying," Doru confirmed. He was turned down. His money wasn't enough and his situation was too visible. But the fact that he went looking tells you how far he was willing to go. "Yes." Stefan was quiet for a moment. He had encountered many varieties of dangerous men in his life. The ones he respected, in whatever cold and professional sense respect applied, were the ones who were dangerous because they were capable. Skilled, strategic. This man was dangerous for a different reason. He was dangerous because he genuinely believed he was right. Men who knew they were doing wrong could be reasoned with, bargained with, redirected. Men who believed their violence was justified, who had built an entire internal architecture to support that belief, who surrounded themselves with the evidence they had selected and discarded the rest. Those men did not stop. They escalated. Every obstacle became proof of persecution. Every consequence became fuel. "He views Mirabel as an extension of himself," Stefan said. "Not a child, not a person with her own." He paused. "He sees her the way he sees his flat, his money, his name, something taken from him." Doru said nothing. He didn't need to. "Which means," Stefan continued, "that losing tonight doesn't end this. It makes it worse." He walked to the window at the end of the corridor. Below, the street was quiet. Rain, amber light on wet stone, the city carrying on. Somewhere in Bermondsey, a man was sitting somewhere dry and rebuilding a plan around a loss he would not accept as final. Stefan's phone buzzed. A message from the private room upstairs. Not from Doru's men. From the staff member he had positioned outside the door. "Child is asking for you." He looked at the message for a moment. Then he went back upstairs. He knocked once. Mirabel opened the door. Her eyes were red at the edges, the only evidence of what had happened in this room that she would likely have allowed herself. Rabbit was under one arm. Behind her, Ruth sat on the small sofa with the blanket still around her shoulders, pale and watchful. "I drew something," Mirabel said. She held up the paper from the menu downstairs. He took it. A drawing and pen, 2 figures, small and large, holding hands. Beside them, Slightly apart, a third figure. Taller, dark lines on the neck and hands. The two figures on the left were labeled in careful, large letters. Me, Mum. The third figure had no label. Mirabelle looked up at him. I left a space, she said. Because I didn't know your name. Stefan looked at the drawing, at the space she had left. Stefan, he said. She took the drawing back, very seriously, and wrote it in. Behind her, Ruth watched. In the corridor, Doru's phone buzzed. He appeared at the doorway, one look at Stefan enough. The father's signal had moved. He was heading back toward the city center. He was heading back toward them. Stefan closed the door to the private room gently behind him. He stood in the corridor for a moment, the drawing still forming in his mind. Those two figures and the space beside them. The careful letters of his name filled in by a 6-year-old who had decided, with characteristic seriousness, that he belonged in the picture. He set it aside. There was work to do. Doru was already at the end of the corridor, tablet up, the blue light of it casting thin shadows across his face. Two of Stefan's men stood behind him, Radu and Philip, both quiet, both reliable, both understanding, without being told that this situation had changed categories. It was no longer a recovery. It was a containment. He stopped moving, Doru said, when Stefan reached him. Signal static. Borough Market area. He's parked or he's inside somewhere. He's thinking, Stefan said. Or he's making calls. Both, probably. Stefan looked at the map on the tablet. Borough Market to Vantage was 12 minutes without traffic. Less, at this hour, on wet roads with a man who had nothing left to be careful about. He'll come here, Stefan said. Doru looked at him. You're certain? He doesn't know what else I know. He thinks I'm a stranger who intervened on the street. He thinks Ruth is here because there was nowhere else to bring her after the warehouse. Stefan handed the tablet back. He still believes this is recoverable. That if he can get to Mirabelle, he controls the situation. He's wrong. Yes, Stefan said. But I want him to stay wrong until I decide otherwise. Doru was quiet for a moment. The particular quiet of a man who had worked alongside Stefan long enough to know when a plan was forming and when to let it form without interruption. You want to bring him in? Doru said. On your terms. I want him on record, Stefan said. Everything. The warehouse. Tonight. The footage, all of it handed to the right people in the right sequence. I want this closed in a way that doesn't leave a gap he can crawl back through. That requires police involvement. Yes. Doru raised an eyebrow. For Stefan Paul, that word police was typically something managed from a significant distance, handled through intermediaries, kept as far from his direct operations as geography allowed. That he was now actively proposing their involvement said more about the seriousness of his intent than anything else could have. I'll make the call, Doru said. Not yet. Stefan looked at the map again. Let him come to us first. Let him make the move in a location we control, in front of witnesses, on camera. Then we hand it all over. No gaps. He looked down the corridor toward the closed door of the private room. She needs this finished, he said. Simply. Not managed. Finished. The next 40 minutes moved with the particular tension of controlled waiting. Stefan positioned his men 2 at the restaurant entrance, 1 at the rear, 1 in a vehicle on the street with a clear sightline to both. Doru coordinated quietly, efficiently, without the kind of visible security presence that would alarm the remaining dinner guests or give anything away to someone watching from outside. Stefan himself went back to the booth by the window. He sat where Mirabelle had sat. He could see the street from here, the full length of the pavement, both directions, the alley mouths, the parked cars. He ordered coffee he would not drink, and watched the rain, and thought about the psychology of a man who had spent 14 months convincing himself he was the victim of the story he had authored. Men like that needed to win publicly. They needed the recovery to be witnessed by the child, by the woman, perhaps by whoever they were reporting to on those phone calls from the warehouse. The retreat from the street earlier, when the crowd had gathered, had been humiliation. The failure at the warehouse, a collapse. He was now operating not from strategy, but from something more dangerous. Egoing crisis. Stefan's phone buzzed. Doru. 1 word. Incoming. 30 seconds later, a dark car moved slowly past the restaurant, not stopping, surveilling, checking for what was visible from the street. Stefan did not move. He sat with his coffee and looked out the window and let the car pass. Let the man inside it see a restaurant doing its business on a rainy evening. Nothing alarming, nothing to suggest that anything had been prepared. The car went around the block, came back, stopped this time, 20 meters down, Engine running. A door opened. The father stepped out. He stood on the pavement in the rain, collar up, looking at the restaurant entrance. He was alone, no second figure, no support. The intermediaries he had approached had turned him down. Whatever network he had been hoping to activate had not materialized. He was here on his own, which made him more predictable and more volatile in equal measure. Stefan stood. He walked to the entrance, pushed through the door and stepped outside, onto the wet pavement, into the rain, and stopped. The father saw him immediately. For a moment neither of them moved. Then the father walked toward him, not running, not cautious, with the deliberate pace of a man who had made a decision and was now simply executing it. "Where is she?" he said, not a question. "Which one?" Stefan said. Something moved across the father's face. "Don't. Ruth is safe," Stefan said. "Mirabel is safe. The footage from the warehouse is secured. The recording of you forcing Ruth into a vehicle in the alley secured. The phone records, the financial documentation, the restraining order violations, all of it, packaged, ready." The father had gone very still. "You're going to walk away from here," Stefan continued. "Or you're going to make a decision that makes everything I just described worse for you. Those are the options." "She's my daughter." "She's a child," Stefan said, "who flinches when she hears your footsteps." The father's jaw tightened. "You have no idea what she is to me." "I know exactly what she is to you," Stefan said. "That's the problem." The father looked at the restaurant door, calculating. The same recalibration, looking for the gap, the angle, the version of this where he still came out with what he came for. There wasn't one. He could see it forming on his face the moment a man stops calculating, because the numbers have all come back wrong. Then Mirabel's voice came from behind Stefan. Small, clear, carrying in the rain. "I'm not going with you." Stefan turned. She was standing in the restaurant doorway, rabbit under one arm, Ruth's hand gripping her shoulder from behind, both of them framed in the amber light. Mirabel was looking at her father with the clear, steady eyes of a child who had decided something and was not going to undecide it. "I want to stay with Mum," she said. "I always wanted to stay with Mum." The father opened his mouth, closed it. Somewhere down the street, the sound of a car. Then two, the kind that moved with purpose. Doru had made the call. The father heard the cars, looked at Stefan, looked at the doorway where Mirabel stood, unmoved and unmoving. And for the first time all evening, he had nothing left to say. The cars arrived without sirens. Two of them, dark, unmarked, pulling to the curb with the quiet efficiency of people who had been briefed properly and understood that noise was not required here. 4 officers stepped out plainclothes, deliberate, reading the scene before moving into it. Doru had chosen his contact well. These were not officers who needed explaining to. The father saw them and did what cornered men always do in the half-second before they accept that it is over. He ran, not toward Mirabel, not toward the restaurant, toward the gap between the parked cars and the alley mouth, the same alley that had swallowed him at the warehouse, the same instinct, the same geometry of escape that his body had clearly rehearsed. He made it 4 meters. Radu came out of the shadow of the adjacent doorway, and the father went down onto the wet pavement, not violently, not dramatically, but with the decisive, controlled economy of a man who knew exactly how much force the situation required. The father struggled for 2 seconds. Then the officers were there, and the struggling stopped, and what remained was a man face down on rain-wet stone, with his cheek against the pavement, and his arms being secured behind him. Stefan watched. He did not move toward it. It was no longer his scene to manage. He had built it, positioned it, delivered it, and now it belonged to the process that would finish it. That was the design. That had always been the design. He turned back to the doorway. Mirabel was still standing where she had been, rabbit under her arm, Ruth's hand on her shoulder. She was watching her father on the pavement with the steady, unreadable expression she deployed when she was processing something larger than she had language for. Not triumph, not relief, something quieter and more complicated, the way the end of a long fear feels not like winning but like a door closing on a room you had been locked in. Ruth was watching too. Her hand tightened on Mirabel's shoulder. One of the plainclothes officers approached Stefan. 30s, close-cropped hair, the professional neutrality of someone who had learned to separate what he thought from what he showed. "We'll need statements," he said. "Everything is packaged," Stefan said. "Doru will provide it. Warehouse location, footage, documentation, all of it." The officer looked at him for a moment with the particular expression people used when they were deciding whether to ask Stefan Paul a question they suspected he wouldn't answer. He decided against it. The woman, the officer said. She'll need to come in. Tomorrow, Stefan said. Tonight she stays here. The officer considered this. Tomorrow, he agreed. They took the father away without ceremony. No shouting, no last words. He looked back once. From the car door, not at Stefan, not at Ruth, but at Mirabel. A long look, the last move of a man who had lost every other one, trying to find in his daughter's face something that would rewrite the evening. Some flicker of need, some evidence that she wanted him. Mirabel looked back. She did not step forward, did not reach, did not give him what he was looking for. She simply stood in the amber light with her rabbit and waited until the car door closed and the car moved and the street was ordinary again. Then she turned and looked up at Ruth. Is it over? She asked. Ruth crouched down to her level, the same posture Stefan had taken on the pavement hours earlier, the same deliberate act of meeting someone where they were. For tonight, Ruth said honestly. And then properly, after. Mirabel considered this with her characteristic seriousness. Okay, she said. I can do after. Ruth pulled her close, held her not gently, not carefully, but with the full force of a mother who had spent the last several hours calculating the probability that this moment would not happen and was now making up for every one of those calculations at once. Mirabel let herself be held. Her arms came up around Ruth's neck. Rabbit dangled from one hand. Her eyes closed. Stefan stood on the pavement in the rain and looked at nothing in particular. He had built his life around the management of outcomes, plans, positions, leverage, sequence. He was comfortable with complexity and unmoved by most things that moved other people. He had stood in rooms where the stakes were considerably higher, by any measurable calculation, than what had just unfolded on this street. He could not have explained, precisely, why this felt like more. Inside, Doru handled the documentation transfer with the officers, while Stefan sat with Ruth and Mirabel in the private room upstairs. A meal had been arranged, quiet, warm, practical. Mirabel ate with the focused seriousness of someone who had not eaten since before the evening became what it became. Ruth ate less. She sat with her hands around a cup of tea, and her eyes moving occasionally to the window, checking the street below with the habit of a woman who had been checking streets for 14 months and had not yet been given permission by her own nervous system to stop. Will they hold him? She asked. Kidnapping charge, restraining order violations, assault witnessed on a public street with CCTV confirmation, Stefan said. Passport flagged. He won't be going anywhere. He has connections. So do I, Stefan said. Ruth looked at him. A long, level look. She was not naive, she understood. Stefan suspected. Something of who he was and what the word connections meant coming from him. She had, after all, sought shelter in his restaurant and accepted his help, and was now sitting in his private room eating food his kitchen had prepared. She had made her assessments. I don't know how to, she started. Don't, he said, not unkindly. She stopped. Mirabel looked between them. He doesn't like thank yous, she told her mother, with the authoritative tone of someone who had known him considerably longer than 3 hours. Ruth looked at her daughter, then at Stefan. Something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, but the nearest thing to one that an evening like this could reasonably produce. It was late when Mirabel finally fell asleep. She did it without announcement, one moment upright, rabbit against her chest, eyes tracking the room, and then simply not, her head tipped sideways against Ruth's arm with the abrupt totality that only children and the genuinely exhausted can manage. Ruth adjusted her carefully, settled her, smoothed the damp curl back from her forehead with one hand. She looked at Stefan. She asked about you, Ruth said quietly. Before you came back to the room, she said. Ruth paused, and something moved through her face. She said, Mum, I think he's one of the good ones. But he looks like he doesn't know that about himself yet. Stefan said nothing. She's 6, Ruth said. She does that. She sees things. I know, he said. I noticed. Ruth looked down at Mirabel sleeping. The red on her cheek had faded now, the earlier mark of her father's hand almost gone. In sleep, her face had released everything it held during waking hours, the vigilance, the composure, the careful management of what she showed. She looked, simply, like a small child who was tired. I've been running for a long time, Ruth said. I don't mean just tonight. I mean... I know what you mean, Stefan said. I'm tired of running. You don't have to, he said. Not anymore. Ruth looked at him. You can't promise that. I just did, he said. Outside, The rain was finally slowing, the first suggestion, in several hours, that it intended to stop. The street below was quiet. The amber light from Vantage's facade still reached the wet pavement, still dissolved into the dark at the edges, still offering its warmth to a city that mostly didn't notice it was there. Doru appeared in the doorway, looked at Stefan, gave a small nod. Everything secured, documentation transferred, officers satisfied, the machine of consequence now running on its own momentum, requiring nothing more from tonight. Stefan stood. He looked at Mirabelle one more time. She had one hand curled under her cheek, and the other still holding Rabbit even in sleep, the grip loose now but present, still there, still holding on. He walked to the door. "Stefan," Ruth said. He stopped, turned. She was looking at him with the full, clear attention of a woman who chose her words carefully, and was choosing these ones with particular care. "She was right," Ruth said. "About you." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he walked out and pulled the door quietly closed behind him. Morning arrived the way mornings do after nights that have taken too much slowly, without apology, the light coming in regardless. It found Vantage quieter than it had been in hours. The dinner service long finished, the staff gone, the restaurant existing in the particular stillness of a place built for noise now holding its breath. Rain had stopped somewhere before dawn. The street outside was clean and wet and silver gray, the amber light turned off, the pavement reflecting a sky that had not yet decided what it wanted to be. Mirabelle woke first. She always did. Ruth had mentioned this once, almost in passing, the way parents mention things that have simply become the texture of their lives. "She's always up before me, even when she shouldn't be." She woke in the private room on the first floor with Rabbit on her chest, and the blanket pulled up to her chin, and the slow, systematic return of memory that children do when they wake somewhere unfamiliar. Her eyes moved across the ceiling, the wall, the window. Ruth, asleep in the chair beside her, head tilted, hand still resting on the edge of the sofa cushion, as though even in sleep she had wanted to stay close. Mirabelle looked at her mother for a long time, not checking, not calculating, just looking the way you look at something after you have come close to losing it, and your eyes need the confirmation that your mind has not yet fully processed. Then she got up, quietly, and went to the window. The street below was empty. A delivery van moved past at the far end. A pigeon landed on the wet stone and reconsidered. Somewhere distant, a bus. The city, ordinary and indifferent, resuming itself. She pressed her hand flat against the glass. "He's not out there," Stefan said. She turned. He was in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the forearm, the tattoos fully visible in the morning light. He looked like a man who had not slept, and had made peace with that fact several hours ago. "I know," Mirabelle said. "I was just looking." "At what?" She considered. "At the street, to see what it looks like when it's normal." He came into the room and sat in the chair across from where Ruth slept. Mirabelle climbed back onto the sofa, crossed her legs, settled Rabbit in her lap. "Is it finished?" she asked. The same question she had asked the night before, but different now. Last night it had meant tonight. This morning it meant something larger. "The charges are filed," he said. "Kidnapping, assault, restraining order violations. His passport is flagged. He won't leave the country." "What about custody?" Stefan looked at her. "You know what custody means," he said. Not a question. "I know lots of things," she said simply. "Mom explained things to me. She said it was better to understand than to be surprised." "She was right," Stefan said. "The custody order will be reviewed. With the charges filed and the evidence recorded, his access will be terminated." "Terminated," Mirabelle repeated, weighing the word. "It means finished," he said. "Properly." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the sky had made its decision pale, winter, blue, thin, and clear. Light moved across the floor of the room. "I used to think it was my fault," she said. Stefan said nothing. He knew, from long experience, that some sentences needed space and not response. That he was angry all the time. "I thought maybe if I was quieter, or better, or—" She stopped, smoothed Rabbit's ear. "I know it wasn't. I worked that out, but I thought it for a while." "Most children do," Stefan said. "It's not the truth." "I know," she said. "The truth is, he was broken before I existed." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what it is." She nodded, once, with the particular finality of someone closing a drawer. Behind them, Ruth stirred. The small sounds of waking a breath, a shift, the hand on the sofa cushion pressing down as she oriented herself. Then stillness, the kind that meant she was awake and listening before she opened her eyes. Then she opened them. She found Mirabel first. Something happened in Ruth's face, not dramatic, not the collapse of relief, just a deep, cellular settling. The expression of a woman whose most essential question had been answered before she had finished asking it. "Morning," Mirabel said. "Morning," Ruth said, her voice still thick with sleep and everything before sleep. Mirabel got up from the sofa and crossed the room and climbed into the chair beside her mother, fitting herself into the space between Ruth's arm and the chair back, with the practiced precision of a child who had done this 10,000 times. Ruth wrapped her arm around her, pulled her in. They sat like that, Ruth's chin resting on Mirabel's hair, Mirabel's head against Ruth's shoulder, Rabbit held loosely in her lap, in the thin winter light of a morning that had arrived without asking whether they were ready for it. Stefan watched them. He was not a man who experienced sentimentality, or if he did, he had spent enough years burying it that he had lost reliable access to the feeling. But something in the composition of the room, the two of them in the chair, the light on the floor, the quiet street outside settled in him in a way that had no useful name. He thought about what Ruth had said the night before. She was right. About you. He thought about the drawing, the two figures, the space beside them. His name filled in with careful, large letters, by a child who had decided he belonged in the picture before she had any particular reason to. He stood. "I'll have breakfast arranged," he said. Ruth looked up at him. "Stay," she said. "Simple. Not a demand. Not an obligation. Just an invitation. Offered openly, by someone who meant it." Mirabel looked up too. "You can sit here," she said, patting the arm of the sofa beside her. "There's room." He looked at the space she was indicating. Then he sat down. Mirabel immediately leaned sideways and rested her head against his arm entirely without ceremony, the way children do when they have decided a person is safe, and returned her attention to Rabbit, adjusting his ears with both hands. Ruth watched this. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Outside, the morning continued its business, the city waking, the street filling, the ordinary world returning to itself. Somewhere in it, the machinery of justice was running on the evidence Doru had delivered. The charges were processing, the passport was flagged, and the long, exhausting apparatus of protection was finally working in the direction it was supposed to work. Inside, in a private room above a restaurant on a rain-cleaned London street, a woman and her daughter and a man who had not expected any of this sat in the thin winter light, not talking, not needing to, just present. The court building was everything. Courts always were: beige corridors, plastic chairs, the institutional smell of carpet and consequence. Ruth had been through buildings like this before, in worse circumstances, with less behind her. She had sat in waiting rooms holding forms and hoping, and been disappointed by the machinery of a system that logged everything and protected nothing in time. Today was different. Today, she had a folder containing 47 pages of documented evidence. CCTV footage transferred to a certified drive, 2 witness statements, 3 police reports, financial records, phone records, and a restraining order violation log that left no interpretive gap. Doru had prepared it. Stefan had not come inside the building. He had driven them there, Ruth in the front, Mirabel in the back with Rabbit on her lap and her feet not quite reaching the floor, and pulled up at the entrance and said, simply, "Doru goes in with you. He knows what to hand over and when." Ruth had looked at him. "You're not coming in. It's better if I'm not in that building," he said. She had looked at him for a moment, with the clear-eyed pragmatism that had carried her through 14 months of being frightened, and had not left her this morning. "I understand," she said, and she did. Inside, the proceedings were precise and brief in the way of things that have been thoroughly prepared. The judge reviewed the documentation with the focused attention of someone who had spent a career distinguishing between cases brought by desperation and cases built on evidence. This was the second kind. The father was present, seated, suited, flanked by a solicitor whose expression suggested he had advised his client against most of what had led to this room and been ignored. The father looked smaller here than he had on the street. He had that quality some men had in formal rooms, the quality of violence that required an audience and a sense of advantage, and had neither, shrinking to something merely pathetic in the fluorescent light. He did not look at Ruth. He looked at Mirabel. Mirabel sat beside Doru in the row behind Ruth, Rabbit in her lap, her feet still not reaching the floor. She was wearing a clean dress, dark blue. Ruth had bought it from a shop 2 streets from Vantage that morning, and her hair had been brushed for the first time since the previous afternoon. She looked back at her father. Steady, clear. The way she looked at everything. He looked away first. The judge spoke for 11 minutes. Custody terminated. Restraining order extended and strengthened. Passport restrictions formalized through the court. Charges to proceed to trial the kidnapping count alone, carrying a sentence that made the solicitor's expression shift in a way that confirmed he had known all along how this would go. Ruth sat and listened, and kept her hands flat on her thighs and did not cry. Not because she didn't want to, but because she had promised herself she would not cry in a room that contained him, that she would save that for somewhere he could not see it and could not count it as his. When it was finished, she stood and turned and found Mirabel already beside her, Rabbit under one arm, the other hand slipping into Ruth's hand with the automatic certainty of something that had always been true. Ruth gripped it. "Is it terminated?" Mirabel asked. "Yes," Ruth said. "Properly finished?" "Properly finished." Mirabel considered this for exactly 1 second. "Good," she said. Stefan was parked where they had left him. He got out when he saw them come through the building's entrance, not hurrying, just standing, leaning slightly against the car, watching them cross the pavement. Reading the way Ruth walked, the way Mirabel was holding her hand, he knew before they reached him. Ruth stopped in front of him. She looked like a woman who had put something down that she had been carrying for a very long time, and was still adjusting to the absence of the weight. "Done," she said. He nodded once. Mirabel had already walked past them both to the low wall beside the car park entrance, where she sat with Rabbit in her lap, and her face turned up to the pale winter sky, not doing anything in particular, just sitting in the open air of a finished morning. Stefan watched her. "What happens now?" Ruth said. "For you? For us. You relocate. Somewhere you choose, not somewhere you're running to. Doru has contacts who can help with housing, documentation, school placement. It's arranged, if you want it." Ruth looked at him. "You arranged it already." "Yesterday," he said. She was quiet for a moment. A taxi passed. The court building's doors opened behind them, releasing 2 strangers into the morning. The city moved around them, unconcerned. "I don't know how to exist in a life where someone just..." She stopped. Started again. "I've been the only person responsible for keeping us safe for so long that I don't know what to do with someone else doing any part of it." "You don't have to do anything with it," Stefan said. "It's just done. That's not how things work." "It is now," he said. Ruth looked at him for a long moment, the full, assessing look of a woman deciding whether to trust a thing that presented itself as solid. She decided. "Thank you," she said, quietly, with the full weight of what it meant and no performance around it. He accepted it without deflecting. Mirabel had climbed down from the wall. She walked back to them unhurried, Rabbit hanging from one hand, and stopped in front of Stefan. She looked up at him. "I have something for you," she said. She reached into the pocket of her blue dress and produced a folded piece of paper. The menu drawing from the previous night, the 2 figures and the third one beside them. His name written in careful large letters in the space she had left. She held it out. "You should keep it," she said. "So you remember." "Remember what?" he asked. She considered the question with the gravity it apparently deserved. "That you're one of the good ones," she said. "Even when you forget." Stefan looked at her, at the drawing in her outstretched hand. He took it. He folded it once and put it in his jacket pocket, the interior one, close. Then he crouched down. Same pavement. Same amber light beginning to warm the stone as the morning opened. Same girl with the same rabbit and the same blue eyes that saw more than they had any right to see. The same posture as the beginning, the man and the child, level with each other. The city moving on around them without caring. "You were brave," he said. Mirabel tilted her head slightly. "You were too," she said. "You didn't have to help. You just did." "You asked me to," he said. "I asked you where my mum was," she said. "You decided the rest yourself." He held her gaze. She was right. He had decided in the moment she had asked her question in the rain, in the moment he had read her stillness and understood what it meant, in the moment he had chosen to stay and keep staying and not stop until it was properly finished. No one had required it. No leverage, no obligation, no calculation of advantage. Just a small girl with a worn rabbit who had looked up at him without fear and asked a question that rearranged something in him. He stood. Ruth took Mirabel's hand. They walked toward the car. Mirabel looked back once the way she had looked back at the restaurant the first evening, checking, making sure. She found him watching. She raised Rabbit's paw. A wave. Stefan stood on the pavement in the thin winter light, the drawing in his inside pocket, the city around him resuming itself, and watched them go. The street was ordinary. The morning was cold and clear. For a man, the city crossed the street to avoid. The smallest voice had been the one that reached him, and he had let it. Thanks for sticking with this story. Until the very end, you're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts and connect with you in the comments.